Some games don't try to impress you. They don't overstimulate you with high-octane action and shooting scenes. They don't ask you to win. They simply sit beside you, quietly, and wait for you to notice what's happening inside yourself. Firewatch is one of those games. It's not about leveling up. It's not about defeating a boss. It's about what happens when life strips everything away and you're left alone with your thoughts. No distractions, no achievements, no certainty, just you and the silence. And if you've ever felt lost, truly lost, not just unsure, but disconnected, this game has a way of finding you at the right time. Firewatch is about a man named Henry, whose life is a mess and doesn't know where he's going. He doesn't know what comes next. He doesn't even know what he wants. And maybe, if we are honest, neither do many of us. Today I want to walk through Firewatch's story, not to analyze it as a game, but to experience it as a mirror for anyone who feels stuck between chapters, emotionally exhausted, unsure how they ended up here, or quietly asking, is this really my life now? This isn't about answers. It's about learning how to walk again, one step at a time, when you're lost in the forest of life. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you enjoy seeking life inspiration from video game stories. Firewatch begins before the forest, before the isolation, before the radios, before the watchtower. It begins with ordinary life. Henry meets Julia. They talk, they laugh, they fall in love. The early moments are fast, warm, almost effortless. The way love often begins when the future feels open and forgiving. They move in together, they build routines, they plan a life, and then something happens that no one plans for.
It's like the universe cooked up the cruelest thing to have happen.
Part of what makes Henry's situation so heavy is Julia. Before Firewatch becomes a story about forest and radios, it's a story about watching someone you love slowly disappear. Julia develops early onset dementia in her early 40s. And what's heartbreaking is that it doesn't arrive like a dramatic event. It arrives quietly. Missed words, small confusion, moments that feel off but not alarming yet. Science tells us something important here. Dementia isn't caused by stress alone, but decades of research show that chronic stress and prolonged anxiety place enormous strain on the brain. Long-term stress increases inflammation, disrupts memory-related brain regions, and weakens the systems that help the brain repair itself. In other words, stress doesn't just exhaust you emotionally, it wears you down neurologically. And when you look at Julia's life, her career, her pressure, her constant mental load, you start to understand why Henry feels so helpless. He can't fix it, he can't protect her, and he can't outrun the fear of what's coming. That kind of helplessness is devastating, and when people don't know how to process it, they don't always fall apart loudly. Sometimes they leave quietly. Henry doesn't go to the forest because he doesn't care. He goes because he doesn't know how to stay present with pain that deep. The future becomes unbearable to imagine, and so he does what many people do when life asks questions they are not ready to answer. After Julia's parents insisted to bring her back to Melbourne, Australia to take care of her, he runs. He doesn't live out of cruelty, he lives out of confusion.
But her parents, I think they always thought she could do better, and that I could have done a better job looking after her.
He takes a job as a fire lookout, 6 months alone in the Wyoming wilderness. No friends, no family, no expectations. Just trees, sky, rivers, silence. The only human contact Henry has is Delilah, his supervisor, who communicates with him through a radio. At first, their conversations are casual, light jokes, deflections, avoidance. But slowly, almost unintentionally, something shifts. They talk more, they open up. They share pieces of themselves they don't share with anyone else.
I don't talk to the other lookouts as much as I talk to you. Not in the same way.
Not because it's safe, but because the forest removes the pressure to perform. They can't see each other, they can't posture, they can't pretend. And in that space, honesty begins. Henry admits something quietly devastating.
I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. Right now, I'm trying to hunt down some vandals, and I don't even know what I'm going to do when I find them. I'm not thinking very far ahead. Me neither. I don't know what's next.
That line isn't just Henry's truth. It's the truth of anyone who has been emotionally derailed by life. Firewatch isn't about solving a mystery. It's about sitting inside uncertainty and realizing you're not alone in it. One of the most misunderstood lessons in Firewatch is about relationships. At first glance, it might look like a story about romance, about Henry and Delilah growing closer. But Firewatch is not a love story. It's a story about connection when you're emotionally homeless. Henry doesn't enter the forest ready to love. He enters the forest trying not to feel. And Delilah doesn't become important because she fixes him. She becomes important because she creates a space where he doesn't have to pretend. This matters deeply. Because many of us approach relationships, romantic or otherwise, not looking for connection, but looking for relief. Relief from loneliness, relief from confusion, relief from responsibility. We want someone to make life make sense again.
I myself have chosen to never get attached to anyone who would miss me, but I know I'm a bit of an outlier. Wait, I don't mean that the way it sounds. I mean, I care about people and I like companionship as much as the next person. But why does it have to come from the same person for your whole life?
But Firewatch shows us something uncomfortable. No relationship can replace direction. Delilah listens. She jokes, she shares. But she cannot give Henry purpose. And that's not a failure, it's reality. Healthy connection doesn't save you. It reflects you back to yourself. If you're lost, relationships can either help you see yourself more clearly or become another form of escape. Henry and Delilah's bond works because it doesn't pretend to be more than it is. It's honest, it's limited, it's human, and that's the lesson. If you are feeling lost, don't chase relationships to give your life meaning. Seek relationships that allow truth, even uncomfortable truth, to serve us. Sometimes the most healing thing isn't being loved. It's being able to drop your mask and be your true self.
Okay, now I'm ready. Let's get to work.
How were those precious few seconds of jobless freedom?
Oh, magical.
Good. Now get to work.
On the surface, Henry's life in Firewatch looks like something many people secretly dream about. No boss breathing down his neck, no emails piling up, no expectations to perform or prove himself. Just a simple job, a quiet tower, and endless stretches of nature. And at first, it feels like freedom. There was a strange relief in stepping out of society's noise, out of deadlines, out of constant comparison. For the first time in a long while, Henry can breathe, but Firewatch is honest enough to show us something deeper, something uncomfortable. Freedom without direction doesn't stay peaceful for long. It slowly turns into drift. Henry's job gives him distance from his problems, but it doesn't give him a reason to move forward. And this is where many people find themselves today.
My thinking is I could stay up all night worried I'm going to lose my job because of the side fire, or I could not worry and let the chips fall where they may.
You leave a job that drained you. You step away from expectations that felt suffocating. You finally create space. And at first, it feels like healing. But then the quiet lasts a little too long, and a new question creeps in. What am I actually doing with my life now? Firewatch reveals a truth we rarely talk about. Not all freedom is growth. Sometimes freedom is avoidance, wearing a peaceful disguise. Henry didn't come to the forest to build a new future. He came because the future he had became unbearable to imagine, and that's human. But the game gently asks us to reflect. Are you moving towards something meaningful, or are you just running away from pain?
So what's wrong with you?
Excuse me?
People take this job to get away from something. So what's wrong?
There's nothing wrong with stepping back. In fact, many people need a season of retreat, but retreat without reflection becomes hiding. True freedom isn't the absence of responsibility. It's choosing a responsibility that feels aligned with who you are becoming. If you are in a season of joblessness, burnout, or uncertainty, this part of Firewatch matters deeply. You are not failing because you don't have answers yet, but you also can't stay suspended forever. The forest is a place to listen, not to disappear. At the moment you start asking, what am I being called toward? Even if you don't know the answer, you've already begun walking out.
Well, in the meantime, you are here, and it's beautiful, and escaping isn't always something bad.
Yeah, sure.
Firewatch moves slowly, painfully slowly for some players. Long walks with nothing happening, quiet moments with no reward. Silence broken only by wind, footsteps, and radio static. And that slowness isn't a flaw. It's letting you experience a peaceful meditation in a Wyoming wilderness. Because Firewatch understands something modern life has trained us to forget. We don't know how to be present anymore. We're always elsewhere, replaying the past, rehearsing the future, comparing ourselves with others, constant mental calculations, and mundane worries. Even when we rest, we are distracted. But the forest doesn't allow that. When Henry walks through the wilderness, there's nowhere to escape to. No notifications, no audience, no performance, just the next step. And slowly, something begins to happen. He starts to notice things. The way light moves through trees, the sound of distant thunder, the rhythm of his own breath. These moments seem small, almost insignificant, but they are quietly profound. Because presence is not about relaxation. Presence is about reconnection. When you're present, you stop living life as a problem to solve and start operating as if all the power in your life starts and ends in this moment. Many people who feel lost believe they are missing purpose, but more often, they are missing contact with themselves. They haven't felt grounded in their body, their emotions, or their surroundings in a long time. Firewatch reminds us that meaning doesn't always arrive as a revelation. Sometimes it arrives as a feeling, a sense of being here, now, fully. And from that place, clarity begins to grow naturally, not forced, not rushed, just earned through attention.
Why are we even here?
To make sure the damn wilderness doesn't burn down.
No. Our job is to be here when that happens. Henry, there are some things you can't prevent. So just stay in your tower, okay? Stay in there and watch.
Henry's job in Firewatch is simple. He's there to watch for fires, not to fight them, not to control them, not even to prevent them entirely, just to notice them early. That detail matters more than it first appears. It's a symbol. Fire represents passion, but it also represents change, and change is rarely comfortable. A fire starts small, a faint signal, a thin line of smoke, something easy to ignore. And that's exactly how inner change begins, not as a dramatic moment of clarity, not as a loud declaration, but as discomfort, restlessness, dissatisfaction, a quiet sense that the life you're living no longer fits who you wish to become. Most people don't lose passion overnight. They lose it slowly. They feel the spark and tell themselves it's impractical. They feel the heat and choose safety instead. They see the smoke and convince themselves it's nothing, until one day, life feels numb. Henry hasn't lost his fire. He's been trying to contain it, but fire isn't meant to be contained forever. Here's the truth Firewatch doesn't say out loud, but shows us anyway. Some fires don't exist to be put out. They exist to burn something away.
Why don't we both just go watch this fire and try to imagine all the old, dead things it's burning away?
Old identities, old stories, old versions of yourself that once kept you safe, but now keep you stuck. Fire is dangerous when it's ignored, but it's also cleansing when it's allowed to do its work. In nature, fire clears dead growth. It makes space for new life. And in your inner world, that's the same. The discomfort you feel right now, the confusion, the frustration, the sense of being lost, that may not be a problem. That may be the beginning of a necessary burning. Firewatch asks a quiet but powerful question. What part of you is asking to be released from the prison of the illusion of security? What beliefs no longer serve you? What roles are you clinging to out of fear? What version of yourself are you trying to protect, even though it no longer reflects who you are? Many people say they want passion, but what they really want is passion without loss, without endings, without grief, without letting go. But fire doesn't work that way. To move forward, something has to burn. Henry's journey isn't about reigniting excitement. It's about allowing the old version of himself, the one defined by avoidance, silence and fear, to finally fall away. And that's why his job isn't to control the fire, it's to witness it honestly. Your job isn't to force motivation, your job is to pay attention. What keeps pulling at you? What keeps challenging you? What feels uncomfortable but alive? Those aren't distractions, they're signals. They're telling you that the self you've been living as can no longer carry you to the next chapter. Firewatch doesn't ask you to burn your whole life down. It asks you to stop protecting what needs to end, to let the fire do its work, carefully, consciously, honestly. Because on the other side of burning isn't destruction, it's space. And in that space, something truer can finally grow.
Okay, I think I am ready to tackle my long-term commitment of keeping this national forest safe from total destruction.
Firewatch doesn't end with a neat resolution, and that's one of his bravest choices. Henry doesn't suddenly find a calling. He doesn't get a perfect explanation. He doesn't step into a clearly defined future. What he does instead is simpler and harder. He stops running. He faces the fact that avoidance can only take you so far. And that's the real beginning of purpose. Purpose isn't a destination you discover. It's a direction you commit to, even without certainty. Most people believe they need clarity before they move. But Firewatch shows us the opposite. Clarity comes after movement, after honesty, after courage, after taking one step without knowing the whole path. Henry's journey teaches us that you don't need to solve your entire life. You just need to stop lying to yourself about where you are. Purpose grows when you choose truth over comfort. When you stop asking, what's the perfect answer, and start asking, what's the next necessary step? That step might be small, a conversation, a boundary, a decision to stop numbing yourself. But it's enough, because walking out of the forest doesn't happen all at once. It happens one clearing at a time. Before I end this video, I want to speak to you directly, not as a creator, but as a person. If Firewatch feels like your story, if you feel lost, disconnected, or unsure what you're building your life around, you're not broken, you're not behind. And I also want you to know this won't be some stiff, formal coaching call. If you decide to reach out to me via DM, we can talk in whatever way feels most natural to you. A Discord voice chat, a simple video call, or even a relaxed conversation while playing an online co-op game together. No script, no pressure, just connection. A safe conversation in a space where you already feel comfortable. If you feel like you're standing alone in the forest, wondering which way leads forward, I'll be honored to walk a small part of that path with you. You'll find the details in the description below. Whatever you choose, thank you for being here. And remember, you don't need to see the whole way out, just the next step. Thank you for watching.